14 years after the Philippines suspended capital punishment, the president is again making a strong push to have it reinstated. He wants death by lethal injection against people who commit heinous crimes and drug-related offenses. But will the reimposition of the death penalty stamp out crime, and will it deliver justice? Or could it possibly be, according to those opposed to it, an even greater injustice? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to this Wednesday edition of The Chiefs. And with me right now are Ana Marie Pamintuan of the Philippine Star, early tonight. Yes, there she is.
Yeah.
And coming online in a while will be Robbie Alampay, reporting from the Channel 5 newsroom in Mandaluyong, and Lucy Cruz Valdez, the head of News 5. Ami, ano mga story for tonight?
Well, marami. Unang-una yung kay Vice President Lenny, mukhang nag-State of the Nation din siya, no? Although 23 minutes lang, inorasan ng iba, 23 minutes long. And of course, sabi niya ang mga Pilipino daw, yun ang natatandaan ko ng gusto, ang mga Pilipino hindi pasaway at hindi inutil. Yun ang natatandaan ko.
And I understand she's also pushing to have academic institutions take part in yung COVID testing verification para mas mapabilis at mas mapagaan yung kasi ang laki ng ano natin backlog doon sa verification if I remember right, mga 11,000 yung variance between yung nag-positive sa test at yung confirmed na positive.
Bagal nga Ang typical yata is 3 to 4 days Ako nagpa-swab ako sa Red Cross 1 day lang. But that's the Red Cross kasi nandun lang yung laboratory I guess kung napakahaba ng pila, dadalhin pa sa RITM, you live in another place. Ayun, medyo matagal talaga 'yon. Ang hirap. Kulang tayo ng laboratory Tapos yung niya pinupush niya na ituloy pa rin yung face to face sa
in selected areas.
In selected areas. So, yun. Dahil
in selected areas in the country, lalo na yung mga areas na number 1 ata kung hindi naman grabe yung infection rate at number 2 kung talagang problemado doon sa infrastructure for online learning.
Siguro mahintay natin yung announcement bukas kasi sabi ng DepEd today, 22.2 million na reach na nila yung target enrollment nila during the pandemic Dahil kulang pa rin yan. Pero yan yung inaasahan nila.
Pero grabe bagsak yung private school enrollment. Ang tindi ng private school enrollment. So you can really imagine, maraming private schools magsasara siguro yan, if not temporarily, permanently. Kung bagsak ang enrollment mo talaga, how can you sustain yourself
Lalo na yung mga, di ba, yung mga vocational, yung mga ganon. Ewan ko yung mga high school, kasi yung iba mahuhuli. Iisipin ng magulang, baka mahuli itong anak ko. Baka pilitin pa rin. Diba? Pero yung mga higher education, di ba, sabi sa atin, almost about at least 100, baka magsara Diba? Here's Robbie Alampay.
Oh, there's Robbie. Robbie, what is your top story tonight?
Well, COVID, we're now at 85,000 and we're practically past China sa bilangan at sa total cases. I mean, it's really something. And of course, if you take note, whether that's percentage of the population, also the rate at the growth of China, we did about 1,900 new cases over the past 24 hours. Yung China, 100 na lang. But that's the big story right now. It's a big indicator of where we are and where we've been.
And plus, I think remember, in 85,000 was supposed to be a cutoff of some sort in deciding whether or not we go back to MECQ or go or loosen up.
Yan yung kayakibat na story of the palace. Presidential spokesman Harry Roque is saying that we should brace for a new announcement by tomorrow, if I
Tomorrow.
remember right. Now, by
Yeah.
tomorrow, my announcement on new, and they're also, uh, I think, something to do with categorizations also, new ways of reporting. But basically, they're saying merong konting pivot, may konting adjustment sa strategy ng gobyerno. So kaya rin yan, it really is certainly a milestone number, but hindi necessarily yan yung nag-trigger. It really is the fact that it's still climbing.
And
We're
the other big story
entering
for
the araw.
Yeah, of course. And the other big story for the week is yung the push for death penalty.
Death penalty.
Beginning nung Monday with the president again pushing for the death penalty bill, which he also did last year in his 2019 SONA. So,
Yes.
well, that's going to be our topic for tonight. We start off with our first guest tonight, yung Commission on Human Rights with Commissioner Karen Dumpit, who joins us live. Commissioner Karen, good evening po.
Good evening.
Hi, ma'am.
evening
Thank you
po.
for joining us.
Thank you also for inviting us.
Mhm. Ma'am, if you look at the numbers kasi, ako kasi I'm assuming that the House will vote the same way it's been voting in the past few years. In 2017, the House already voted on third and final reading for the death penalty. It was in, I think, March 2017. So more or less, you might expect the same thing again for the House. Yung Senate has always been the big question mark eh. And so far, what we know of, merong sureball na yung death penalty bill, at least in varying degrees, with 8 senators. That's kasi these eight senators filed death penalty bills, and that's already 1/3 of the Senate. So konti na lang na talon, na konti na lang kailangan nilang baguhing mga boto para makuha nila yung 50% plus 1. Ano po ang posisyon ng CHR, and how does the CHR look at these numbers?
Well, actually, we've done our own political mapping as well. No? And of course, as we know, the midterm election results show that there are more allies in the Senate now for the death penalty. It seems to appear that way, no? But we're not going to stop in ensuring that this particular measure is blocked, because it's violative also of the treaties that we have been signing up for, no? Particularly International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. We are a state party to that. And also particularly the second optional protocol aiming at the abolition of the death penalty, which totally prohibits the reintroduction of the death penalty. No? At matagal na po niyang sinabi na anong mukha ang ipapakita natin before the international community when we have committed to not reintroduce the death penalty in perpetuity. There is no opt-out provision in that particular treaty, and the sanctions or the impact that it will bring when we go against that is something more than is something that we have to reflect on. Kasi trust is very important, no? When you make dealings with the international community, bilateral relations, for instance, will also be affected by that.
Ma'am, what exactly, speak to that? I mean, sanctions. How exactly will that work? And what sanctions exactly are we talking about?
Well, sanctions, meaning, that's why I said, no, the impact of it is something that we have to brace for if this will continue and if this is enacted into law. No? For instance, we are a beneficiary to the general scheme of preference plus. What is this? This is a trade agreement with the EU, and it brings down the tariffs so that we can compete in the EU market in the same manner that EU can also trade with us. Now, the number one industry that benefits from the GSP plus arrangement is actually our tuna industry. So, ang tuna industry, pagka yan ay napatupad, when we applied for the GSP, we actually committed to say that we will follow all the treaties, all the human rights treaties that we have committed to abide by. No, one of them, of course, is in the international political rights.
Nawala.
And alam naman natin, and if we take a look at the other countries, marami nang na-delist dun sa GSP na yun. Like, if I remember correctly, Sri Lanka has been delisted because of the human rights abuses that have happened in the country, and the EU actually reviewed the compliance to their commitments under the GSP. So they were suspended. No? So anong mangyayari niyan sa atin? Our tuna industry will suffer, and it's not only the tuna industry that's actually benefiting from the GSP plus. No, agriculture as a whole. If you take a look at the benefits to the economy, when we trade with the EU, it's actually agriculture that's number one there. No? And it's not only that as well. You have treaties on drugs, no? When we talk about international crime, when we cooperate for transnational crime, yung cooperation na yon will actually be subject to, doubt. How can they trust us if we go against these commitments that we have had, no? So ang impact nun, even I think the former secretary of NEDA also said na, I'm not sure though, but also said yung trade treaties importante rin yan. So it's all about commitment, it's all about confidence, whether you as a state party will be able to comply and will not renege on all those commitments. No? Trust.
But Commissioner, is there a precedent for countries who are signatories to the treaty on the Convention on Abolition of Death Penalty? Are there other countries that have withdrawn? At ano
No.
nangyari sa kanila? Wala pa.
Okay. Thank you for that question. No, there is no opt-out provision in this particular
Yes.
treaty. No opt-out provision. Yun ang sinasabi sa international law. Of course, we can always challenge that. But again, the impact of that is something that we have to brace for. Kasi yung trust and confidence as a state party, as an entity that will enter into agreements will be at stake.
So there is no precedent. No other country has done it. Kasi tinatanong ko, since we also withdrew from the ICC.
But the difference in ICC is may opt-out provision.
Yes.
Ang second optional protocol wala. Yun ang sinasabi natin. No? We did a study on that already. And even if it gets questioned domestically, international law will be unaffected. Meaning to say that even if we go ahead and do it domestically, we will still be considered a state party to the second optional protocol.
But Commissioner, this is not the first time that we are in danger of being taken out of the GSP Plus. I remember in 2017 there was also a time when we were in danger of being taken out of GSP Plus because of the war on drugs.
Yes.
But it seemed like Malacanang did not care whatever would happen with our position with the GSP Plus during that time. Plus, I don't know whether any sanctions were taken against our position with GSP Plus, and the war on drugs did go on, still went on. So that brings up the question: number one, will Malacanang care, despite what the economic managers say? And number two, would sanctions really be imposed by the EU?
Well, it's a process, no. There's always a monitoring process, and in fact, the EU actually released its report on the GSP Plus compliance on the Philippines last February. So, nagmamanman sila ngayon, syempre, and things are developing. And I'm sure that they will keep an eye on the Philippines when it comes to our compliance, including and especially on this issue about the death penalty.
Ma'am, quick question lang. How often is that monitoring on the compliance? Para lang alam natin yung cycle niya. Because if it took place recently, when is the next monitor?
I think in December there will be another one. No? I'm not sure about the cycle, but the last that I heard of course, is that February there was a report. And I believe that in December, I think there will be another one. I'm not sure though, but I can get back to you on that.
Commissioner, I think you know that our president has a low opinion of the European Union when it comes to human rights. And considering the situation now, the mood in Congress, do you think there's a greater chance at this time na mapapasa tong death penalty?
Well, sa tingin namin, mas maraming allies ngayon sa Senado. Kasi if you remember, last Congress, ang nag-stop ng process was really the Human Rights Committee in the Senate because of this issue about treaty compliance.
Yes.
And the last directive, I believe it was Senator Drilon, I see his picture there, he actually directed the Department of Justice and the Department of Foreign Affairs and said that unless you show us how we can get out of this first before we enact a law, then tell us. But the DOJ and the DFA has not gotten back as far as I know, as far as I am aware of. No. And then, of course, we heard also, and we thank, of course, Senator Gordon, who said that he's not likely to conduct hearings on the death penalty as well. So we're hoping that we have more allies in the Senate, and in like manner in the previous Congress, we hope that we are able to stop or block this particular move to restore the death penalty.
Yes, but
Pero
ma'am,
ma'am,
that's
mas dominated
diametrically
ngayon.
opposed. Ma'am, that's diametrically opposed to how the Senate president is assessing it. And some senators, frankly, even from the opposition, are acknowledging that actually right now, as Ed has already said, mukhang they have more numbers, especially as they said, if they would be a quote-unquote more reasonable limitation on kung saan ma-apply ang death penalty. But certainly Senate President Tito Soto says he is more confident that there are more people more open to this.
Well, kami, the Commission on Human Rights, like any other government agency, when invited to hearings, will always say our piece. And we've done it so many times already. We are ready to defend the position to protect the right to life. We believe that the death penalty is violative of the right to life, and it is the utmost form of torture. And it reneges, this particular action will actually show that we are reneging on our human rights obligations. So we're ready to defend our position. As relentless as they are to restore the death penalty, we will be relentless to block that particular measure to the best of our abilities.
Okay.
Well, the argument that they're presenting now is that if they limit the death penalty to only those with the heinous crimes, for example, high-level drug trafficking, their claim is that this takes away the factor of it being anti-poor. That's what they're arguing right now. Now, if you go after drug lords, and these are supposedly the rich people, and then that makes it more palatable now for people in general to accept the death penalty bill. Your thoughts on that? Of course, we know your position on death penalty, but would that be a factor, an element, or an important variable in this discussion?
Well, even the narrowing of the scope of the death penalty is still violative. No? So we don't believe in that. What we are saying is, if this is being pushed, as the president said, to be a deterrent, the death penalty is not a deterrent. As we know, it's the severity of punishment will never be a deterrent. It's actually solid police work, intelligence work, for instance, and proper implementation of the laws. No? Severity of punishment is never a deterrent. We've seen it already. In fact, right now, there is no death penalty, but if you talk to the police and the security sector, criminality is going down according to them. So it's a false promise, no, to say that the death penalty will bring about a deterrence in criminality, especially in heinous crimes. That's simply a false promise.
Well, just in case it's passed by Congress, since we seem to be all expecting it will be passed, and if it's passed, it's sure to be signed by the president. What are the options for the Commission on Human Rights?
Well, we can always question the constitutionality of that. We can always question it in international fora because, for instance, just to give you an example, um, uh, in October we will be defending our report on the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights implementation. This is in October, and we will be facing the UN Human Rights Committee, and this is one of the list of issues that they have asked, and they are actually monitoring the developments of that. So we will be cited to be reneging on our commitments. And as you know, hindi naman yan parang police na hulihin tayo or may sanctions tayo. But again, our credibility in the international community will be at stake if that's the case. Just to also say that we are also cooperating in terms of trying to solve organized crime, international organized crime. So how are we going to? How will they cooperate with us if we have death penalty on the table? Just the case of Mary Jane Veloso is a good example of that. In fact, when we pleaded for the life of Mary Jane Veloso, we said, don't kill her kasi we need her. She's a vital witness. If we are going to trace and the syndicate behind this, we shouldn't actually kill the victim of this. No? But yung mga ganong argument. Aside from that also, we do have Filipinos in death row in other countries. So I think it's also hypocritical for us to beg the life of our fellow Filipinos abroad, and then if we bring back the death penalty here, we kill our own. So we won't have the moral high ground for that.
Well, I imagine government saying in that particular example that that there is going to be a distinction when it comes to our OFWs. I mean, really, the optics there are these are workers. They are victims. They are in some cases, in some of the more notorious cases, nagamit, naging drug mules, but certainly low level. And as Ed pointed out, what government is trying to point out here is that it's different because we're going to limit it precisely to high profile, high value targets.
Well, that's why human rights are universal, di ba? And it's the same standard. Pag tao ka, may karapatan ka. And it's a fundamental right, the right to life. No? So hindi tayo namimili kung ito ay isang napakasamang tao at ito ay mabait na tao o di kaya naloko lang. So that's why the system is there. And it's a universal value. No? So we're actually basing it on that. Aside from that, just to let you know also, of course, we said that this is a form of torture. I mean, the utmost form, in fact, because you're taking away life. Even lethal injection has been shown to actually inflict pain, no? And if you take a look at the anti-torture law, meron dong mga provisions that you can poison, etc. So this may be in conflict with that, and that's one of the arguments that we're trying to pursue as well.
I don't think the president will mind kung masasaktan. He's saying the death penalty is for retribution. Anong argument nyo kapag you're saying you're going to challenge it before the international before an international forum? Are you going to the Supreme Court as well?
Well, that remains to be seen, but it's not a far-fetched idea. Of course, we will do the best that we can to be able to pursue this position of ours. And I'm sure it's not only the Commission on Human Rights that will question that, but human rights groups will also be with us in solidarity to be able to question this particular this particular move of bringing back the death.
But Karen, kasi we had a death penalty for what, 7 or 8 years ata, from panahon ni FBR going down to panahon ni GMA.
Yeah.
And there wasn't any legal problem then. What would make it different now?
The difference now is we are a state party to the second optional protocol. That was in 1993, but we became a state party to the second optional protocol in 2007. So that's one of the changes now. The second is we have enacted the Anti-Torture Act. So in 2009, I believe. So those are new things that can come into play when we go to other forums, no, particularly the courts.
Okay. Commissioner Karen Dumpit ng Commission on Human Rights. Ma'am, maraming salamat po for joining us tonight.
Thank you
Thank
po.
you. Thank you so much.
Salamat po.
Good night.
Good
Good night
night.
po. We will just pause for a break, so please stay with us.
Welcome back to the Chiefs. We're now in the final stage of our conversation, and we're just waiting for our next guest. That's Congressman Robert H. Barbers. In the meantime, Ed, I'm wondering, Ed and Robbie, we're still with Ed Lingao and with Robbie Alampay, of course. I'm wondering. I'm sure the administration is aware about that no opt-out provision from the treaty on the abolition of capital punishment. Obviously, also they don't care. Kasi pinupush pa rin nila. I wonder.
Actually, yun nga eh, remember nga, I was saying nga kanina, I was asking Commissioner kanina, do you think that the palace really cares
Yes.
what the reaction the international community is?
Yeah.
Of course, the finance
Alright.
managers care, but would the palace care? Kasi we've seen in the past 4 years, pati yung GSP, naging
Yes.
issue na yan noong 2017 eh, they didn't care.
Yeah.
And remember, the argument always is sovereignty. That's always the
Yes.
argument of the president. And they've taken on even something bigger, a treaty ratified by the Senate, pulling out of the
The VFA.
International Criminal
Yes.
Court. And same arguments. We're a signatory, and more than being a signatory, we had ratified that treaty. And going to that question, it's not even a matter of do they care. They can even say they care, but ultimately, ang argument is that we're a sovereign country. We can do what we want.
Yes. And if it's the Senate na papayag at this time, sila lang naman yung nagpa-block before, di ba? Pag sinabi nilang okay na, di okay na. We are the representatives of the people. Di ba?
And then,
Siguro, yun.
and then it goes to your point, Ed, di ba, na parang at the end of the day, did you feel anything from the EU? Did you feel anybody getting penalized? Hindi rin eh, not necessarily. So that's already on two levels, really very serious questions and very valid questions if you go by experience, both with this government and how the international community has actually sanctioned or not sanctioned any.
Also, keep in mind that the Senate now is more pro administration than the 17th Congress. Kasi in 2019, wipe out
Yeah, they won big.
yung opposition.
And alam naman ninyo, as I've already mentioned, kung ano tingin ng presidenteng ito sa EU. No? So I don't
Yeah.
think he really cares. He doesn't care about the two.
Pero it's still fascinating, notwithstanding the realities and the realpolitik and yung bilangan natin sa Senado at sa Kongreso. I mean, it's the same points, but they do have, I think there are valid questions as to both on the level of human rights, on the level of its efficacy and effectiveness. Certainly yung argument na binring up ni Commissioner, sila nagsasabi na bumababa ang crime eh. Di ba? Then why do you need this? I mean, why do you need the additional deterrence, quote unquote, despite the fact that all studies show it is not a deterrent? In the meantime, on the other side of it, it is government and it is the police that is saying that right now what we have, bumababa ang crime sa Pilipinas.
Okay. I think we should get the position of the guy in charge of the Committee on Dangerous Drugs. We'd like to welcome Congressman Robert H. Barbers. Good evening, Congressman.
Good evening.
Good evening po.
Good evening. I'm sorry, I got stuck.
Yes.
dun sa special news.
Okay. Malinaw po kami. Congressman,
Yes, clear.
ang unang-unang ine-emphasize ng mga opponents, one of the biggest, is that there is no opt-out from that commitment, our international commitment to abolish capital punishment. Ano pong masasabi niyo doon? Wala daw doon na opt-out provision. We cannot get out of it. Congressman.
Nakamute po yata kayo.
Congressman, can you hear us? Good evening po. Nawala po yata si Congressman.
Na-mute niyo yata po yung ano nyo.
Nakamute po yata.
Which was strange kasi kanina he was talking.
Oo nga
Hello?
Congressman.
Yeah,
Hi.
sir. Go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
Hi. Okay na, sir?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Uulitin ko lang yung tanong ko, sir. Kasi sabi ko, yung one of the biggest arguments of those opposing the restoration of capital punishment kasi mukhang sigurado naman sa House na mapapasa eh. At mukhang ang usapan ngayon sa Senate, mukhang matutuluyan na. But people are reminding Congress that there is no opt-out provision from our international commitment to abolish capital punishment. Ano po yung masasabi niyo doon? Wala daw opt-out provision.
Well, I don't think just for example yung ating international treaty, yung VFA, 'di ba? When the President Duterte said na ayaw niya na mag VFA, the Senate abrogated the treaty. And we can
But
also
that's
do the same.
bilateral eh. Bilateral eh. Yung sa capital punishment is an international commitment.
But
Yung sa
sir, the Senate did not abrogate the
The Senate
treaty.
did not
Yes,
abrogate.
yes.
Again.
And it's not a treaty, yes. VFA is not, it's not a treaty.
Yeah, but similarly, almost all treaties, especially kapag ang issue is about the fundamental or constitution of our country, I think that should prevail. Now we can there are international organizations where we are members of, and other nations are also members of, that sometimes they do not follow. Example lang, itong sa West Philippine Sea, the China did not follow the arbitration ruling. And they are member of UNCLOS, they are member of the United Nations, and yet they did not follow. So I don't see any reason, if it is the wisdom of the legislature to come up with a capital punishment, and that this will form part of the law of the land. And I think this is what should prevail.
Yes,
Sir,
sir,
yung
but
sample nyo, hindi
sabi
ba,
na po ni Commissioner
hindi ba
kanina,
hihina yung ano niya? Hindi ba yung hihina, I'm just, i-follow up ko lang yung ginawa niya example. Hindi ba hihina yung argument natin sa West Philippine Sea that China should in fact comply with the UN law of the sea? Tapos ngayon tayo pala yung magbabiolate din ng treaty. Hindi ba hihina yung argument natin kapag gano'n?
Hindi, totoo, no? Because of that particular example that I used, sinasabi ko lang that no one can stop any nation, no? Especially if it is the law of the land that is at stake. And it is incumbent upon the legislature to ensure that the laws of the land will be followed.
Yes, sir.
Sa akin palagay, what should prevail here, if it runs conflict with any treaty or is our constitution. And if the constitution allows the imposition of the capital punishment as manifested by the wisdom of the legislature, then I don't see any problem with that.
Well, yet, Congressman, tama naman po yung point niya. Certainly, if you go by how this government has acted, certainly mananaig pa rin at the end of the day yung sovereignty and what this government wants to do. Correct lang natin yung kanina. The Senate did not even abrogate any treaty. It was the president saying, no, this is foreign policy. This is my prerogative to do as I wish, invoking sovereignty. So we're there. You can invoke sovereignty. Yan ang mananaig. But penalty and getting penalized by other nations, this is also the prerogative of other nations. And in this particular case, that's what the commissioner is and critics are also warning. Yes, we can push through with what we want to do. We can invoke sovereignty, but there are consequences that we might have there. For example, GSP Plus keeps getting into the conversation.
Well, I agree with you, Robbie, no, na merong mga consequences, and there are perhaps pretty stiff implications if we do not follow what we have signed in for, no? But sa akin kasi, in the whole of Southeast Asia, it's only the Philippines and Cambodia who doesn't have the death penalty on drug-related crimes. So, and that gives it perhaps some sort of a reason for all these drug syndicates to proliferate in the area where they feel and they know that they can get away with the penalty of death. So sa akin palagay, ito yung dapat bigyang tuon. Ito yung bigyan ng weight natin, no? Especially if indeed there will come to a point that we will have to abrogate whatever membership in any international organization, whatever conditions, whatever contract that we've signed with these international organizations, as long as it will do good for the country, I don't see any reason for that. I myself would probably would support that, Robbie.
Okay, then sir, then by all means let's get into that discussion on the state the of drugs and narcotics and the problem here in the Philippines. We're in the fourth year of one of the most aggressive war on drugs in the world. I mean, even comparing to Southeast Asia, ano po ba talaga ang baseline ng pinag-uumpisahan natin? Because we were getting the impression from government over the past 4 years saying that the war on drugs is winning. And now you're saying that now actually we're worse off. Where are we exactly before we get into a conversation of what else we need in terms of stiffer penalties? Ano po ba talaga ang premise natin? Bumababa ba ang crime? Bumababa ang drugs o hindi?
Well, sa aking palagay, no, since the time of the drug war, no, implemented by this administration, Duterte's drug war, number one, the Filipino people were informed of the gravity and the picture of the prevalence of drugs and drug addicts in the country, because it was the only during this administration where we found out that there were already PNP high officials, AFP high officials, even elected officials who are involved in either protecting, cuddling, or even financing some of the drug syndicates that come here and sell and apply their drugs in the country. So ganun nakalala yung sitwasyon. Now, they also implemented a program wherein the addicts would voluntarily surrender and admit, no, that they are users and they want to be rehabilitated. Imagine, 2 million, I think a little over 2 million yung mga umamin na nagsabing sila ay drug addict. Yun lang yung umamin. What about yung hindi umamin? I've met a lot of those who are users but did not go to the barangays and say that I am a user. Another thing is that during this administration, we were able to discover and raid, no, all these clandestine laboratories na nagkalat na pala sa buong isla ng Pilipinas. Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, everywhere, there's nakakalat na yung mga clandestine shabu laboratories. In fact, these are not just ordinary shabu laboratories, but these are laboratories that produces millions of tons a month. Can you just imagine, just 10% of all this production goes to the local community. Ay, masyado nang dadami ang ating ano.
Pero kung if I may break in, if I remember correctly, from those reports sa mga nare-raid ng mga shabu labs, puro mga caretaker na huhuli. So, death penalty, mga caretaker, hindi mga drug lords. I don't remember any drug lords being caught doon sa mga lugar kung saan may mga raids.
Merong narco-politician na...
One particular, sorry, Congressman, just to put a finer point on that, just to recall one particular story of a drug factory that was found, yung nasa container and so on. So far, nakukulong pa lang doon. Literally, tama si Ed, yung caretaker, yung taong nahuli doon sa may container.
Yes, totoo yan. Ano? In fact, itong mga drug syndicates, because they operate here, no, they have in their pockets officials. No? Kagaya nga sinasabi ko kanina, no? There are PNP officers, AFP officers, elected officials, Bureau of Customs officers and officials, ano pa bang nandiyan dyan? Barangay captains, barangay officials. And because of this network of these drug syndicates, they were able to smuggle, if not...
yes, sir, but it begs the question, and this was brought up by the commissioner earlier as well, the argument na it is not the severity of crime, it is the certainty of getting caught that is the real deterrent. You mentioned na identify natin lahat to, everybody who's in cahoots and so on. Then why do we concentrate there? Why don't we concentrate on arresting all of these people na nasa matrix ng presidente, na sinabing people want to see that. People want to see na nakakulong itong mga malalaking players. Why don't we concentrate on that first instead of having a very severe death penalty? Because at the end of the day, at the end of 5 years, wala pa rin tayong pakita ilan ba yung naaresto.
I agree again with you, Robin. No? Kasi isipin mo, itong sunod-sunod na discovery of clandestine laboratories, the raids that were conducted by our PNP and our PIDEA, all this drug haul that we were able to apprehend, no, only proves a point na ang dami niyan dito. Ang tanong, bakit marami yan dito? Kasi itong mga sindikato are in cahoots with officials of the land. This could either be PNP officers, etc., etc. Now, binibigyan natin, wala naman, in fairness naman sa ating kapulisan at sa ating members ng PIDEA, they're doing their jobs. Although some of them are rogue cops, rogue PIDEA officers, maybe involved also and under the payroll of the drug syndicates. But you have to give it to them because they were able to discover and raid all these drugs that are proliferating in the community. Now, nandun tayo, no? Yung apprehension. There are about a little over 150,000 PNP officers, men and women. I doubt if there is about 10% of those membership or of the roster of the PNP that are rogue. Siguro maiilan dyan na mga talagang involved. And this should not stop us, no, from saying that the PNP are all rotten and belong to a basket of bad eggs. Because marami naman po dyan na nagtatrabaho. And some of them have even gave up their lives, no, in the service of the country. So
Yes, sir.
ganun din po sa PIDEA, ganun din po sa ating armed forces.
Yes, sir. We agree with you, sir. Actually, we agree with you on all those points. But that also brings back the question na, as you said nga, ang dami pala mga general, ang dami mga police, mga AFP na involved sa drugs. Where are they now? Have they been convicted? So even dun sa part pa lang na after identifying all these people, they have not been prosecuted successfully, at least to any great degree. And then we wield the bigger stick instead of wielding a better system of investigation.
Yeah, I agree. Kailangan lang kasi amendahan din natin at bigyan pa ng konting ngipin yung ating batas dito, no. The prosecutors sometimes are also in the payroll of the drug syndicates, no. And marami pong instances na na-discover ito at yung iba nga ngayon na nasa listahan ng ating drug list, I'm sure they are now determining and trying to gather more evidence kasi hindi naman po mahirap naman po mag-file ng kaso sa isang protector o sa isang cuddler. That's the reason why dun sa Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act, we are trying to amend, no, that although this will again become controversial because there is a quote unquote a presumption of legality, no, dun sa identifying the cuddler or the protector. We will discuss that later on, but again, no, dun sa batas na gusto natin gawin, magkaroon ng isang deterrent, no. I personally believe that if you have something like that, no, I don't think these drug syndicates would even think of coming to the Philippines and use this as their haven. Kasi sila mismo, no, there are drug syndicates from China that came here, or some of them are even Mexico, coming all the way from Colombia. Nandito sila because they feel that this could the perfect location, perfect environment, and very cheap for them.
I think,
So,
but Congress.
Yung committee niya will start or will it start deliberating on the proposal? Kasi you mentioned the PNP chief, sabi niya, gusto niya even for 50 grams of shabu, capital punishment na daw yun. Medyo kukunti yun ah. Are you amenable to that kind of proposal?
Yes, marami kasi mga proposals. Some of them are proposing 100 grams, some of them are proposing 60 grams, some of them are even proposing a little bit higher. So we will consolidate all these proposals. In fact, mayroong mga members ng Congress na nag-file ng mga amendments on that provision.
Yes.
At ito ay isi-set up, we will form a technical working group so that we can consult all the sectors, the the stakeholders here, the DOJ, the PNP, the PIDEA, so that we can come up with a reasonable amount or weight that should be eligible for the punishment of death or the capital punishment. If
So hindi nyo pala susundin yung yung nandun sa Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act, nandun yung volume na dati pwedeng pwedeng capital punishment. Hindi nyo pala susundan yon. Or yung level na yung amount na pwedeng life imprisonment, hindi nyo susundan pala yon.
Sa ngayon kasi we're in the process of amending several provisions. Isa yun
Yes.
sa mga tina-target na amendahan. Kung hindi siya maamendahan, we will stick with the old, the old provision of the 9165. And dun lang kami. No? Ibig sabihin that the members or the stakeholders were not convinced that there is a need to change what was approved in the provisions of the Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act of 2002.
Congressman, if you don't mind, babalikan ko lang po yung earlier on yung question. Yung the premise for why are we talking about reimposing the death penalty specifically for drugs? And you've asserted again na because marami yung mga big time, yung mga leader ng mga sindikato, and even the people in government, military or the police, wherever, who might be in cahoots, lahat to hindi pa rin natatakot. Diba? So, ulitin ko lang po, and make it much more simpler. Are we talking about reimposing the death penalty basically because when it comes to the real leaders of drug syndicates, the war on drugs has been a failure for the past 4 years?
No, I wouldn't say it's a failure, Robin. No? In fact, on the other hand, mas meron ngang reason to say that it was successful, no, for the last 4 years, because of all these apprehensions by the number of shabus that were taken out of the streets, the number of pushers or sellers that are apprehended and put to jail, the number of clandestine laboratories that are discovered and dismantled, and all these things are manifestations of the success of this drug war.
But precisely, Congressman, I mean that's why we're asking, because either the war on drugs has been succeeding or it has not. And if it's been succeeding, then again it goes back to the question of then why do we need the death penalty?
Okay.
If it's working, why do we need to talk about something that could potentially penalize the country?
Okay, what we're trying to penalize and target here are the drug lords, the high-value personalities involved in this trade, no, in this illegal trade. So, kagaya nga ng reklamo ng karamihan, yung mga pusher lang nahuhuli, yung mga because wala naman pong drug lord na makikita nyo nasa kalsada at nagbebenta. All they have to do is just make a phone call, order of his lieutenants to bring this 1 kilo here to this customer, and all these things. No? So ngayon, we're trying to come up with a strategy that would perhaps deter all these drug syndicates in considering doing their business in the country, because there is a penalty that's very stiff, similar to the countries where they come from.
Okay, then Congressman, would this be a more fair way of asking the question? Instead of generally saying nag-fail pa o nag-succeed yung war on drugs, is it a more fair statement to therefore say we're talking about reimposing the death penalty because over the past 4 years, the war on drugs has only succeeded in getting the small-time players and it has failed when it comes to getting the big-time players?
Well, no, I'm sorry. I beg your pardon, Robin. Dun sa statement na yun, I would like to take exception because we cannot. There's a lot of things that we can use as a measurement in the success of this drug war. Hindi lang yung nahuling high value. Because remember, taking away the illegal drugs in the streets, apprehending all these people who are selling is already perhaps a big achievement, no? Because we don't want to wait for the day na tayo o kamag-anak natin or even our children will become victims of these sellers in the streets. And that's one way of measuring it. Now, another would be the arrests and perhaps apprehension of leaders of the drug syndicates. Dito naman sa drug war ni President Duterte, nakita mo si Paruhinog, na-dismantle yung sindikato ni Paruhinog. Di amin Baratong syndicate.
Pinatay naman yun hindi naman yun na-aresto.
But he was arrested first.
Yung malalaki mga drug dealer pinatay, hindi naman na-aresto.
Well, I cannot say anything about that. Kasi medyo the point is these guys were apprehended and these are known to be involved in a syndicate that ply their drugs in the country. No, yung merong syndicate sa Cebu na malaking syndicate din that by the name he goes by the name of Jaguar. He's the biggest seller of pusher in the Mandaue and Cebu City area. And he has around 100 people, lieutenants under his command. So medyo malaki na rin to. Although he's not the head, no? Meron pa ring head. Kaya nga the president has been naming a lot of even judges who are in cahoots also with the syndicates.
Yes, sir.
Of course, mahirap nga mag-develop ng case at this time, no? Sa ngayon, I'm sure they're still trying to build up a case against these people who are in the drug list because napakahirap i-prosecute yung mga cuddlers and the protectors because there's a lot of things that is required and needed in order for the police to identify a protector, a cuddler.
Yes, sir. Well, sir, I suppose part of the concern ng ibang tao doon sa death penalty is also stemming from the fact that the president sometimes tends to play fast and loose with his own facts as well with his own lists. Kasi nakatatlo o apat siyang drug list na inilabas sa publiko and then it turned out that it had to be vetted again and again. Di ba? So doon pa lang, medyo kakaban din yung ibang tao na parang, teka, paano ko nasama ako dyan? Na hindi naman dapat. Tapos, babawiin na lang. You know what I mean, ba? In the end, it would require a whole lot of systematic and scientific investigations before we could say with any certainty that we are confident that we can just punish somebody with the final punishment, which is death.
There's a process that they do. No, I think there are 3 agencies involved in the vetting of these people in the drug list, no, submitted to the president. And each agency, if I'm not mistaken, validates the findings of each other. No, parang ganon. And these are done clandestinely also. No, hindi naman sila nagko-compare notes. They only validate information. At kapag ka nagkatugma-tugma, I think those are the names that are written in the final drug list that's submitted to the president. So medyo mayroon ngang prosesong mabigat at mahirap and talagang medyo nakakalungkot nga because even up to this time, no, when the president is really serious in this drug war, there are still a lot of officials, even elected officials, who are still involved, no? Because they know that medyo wala ngang tayo dito, wala pang ngipin masyado. Kaya nga po, we're trying to amend the law, consult the experts. In fact, we will ask opinions from experts perhaps maybe in other countries, no, and how they were able to succeed in their drug war. The likes of Colombia, Mexico, maybe even USDA, so that they can give us more idea. Although I'm not saying they were successful because there are still drugs out there being smuggled in and out of the US. So medyo kailangan din natin sumabay doon sa because nagiging high-tech po ang ating mga sindikato. Luging-lugi ho yung ating mga enforcers. If our enforcers are using handguns, these guys are using machine guns. If our police men and PIDEA personnel are using SUVs, the the drug syndicates are using bulletproof SUVs. Yun ang medyo talagang kung doon natin tignan medyo talagang tagilid yung laban natin. But in spite of that, we seem to have been very successful somehow dito sa ating bansa, and we still need to do a lot more.
Okay, maraming salamat po, Congressman Robert Ace Barbers of Surigao. Thank you
Salamat po.
Thank you, sir, for joining us tonight.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. Medyo mahina yung audio kaya I'm trying to hear you guys out.
Okay lang po.
Okay lang po.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Salamat. Thank you.
Salamat
Ingat
po.
po. And that will be all for this edition of the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. I'm Edwin Gaupa News.
I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Robbie Alampay, and we are One News.